Some of the dissenting commissioners say it's blanket immunity. Which is it?
Well, I think it's actually both. So the order does give Facebook immunity for anything that happened before it. So it is comprehensive and doesn't have to list out any potential issues that the FTC would address. But it also does require Facebook to establish a new parallel track of privacy officers and privacy management that will look over all of the different decisions that are being made in all of its various products, and then report up to an independent portion of the board of directors who will now be responsible for attesting personally that these controls are in place.
How much power do you ascribe to this committee? I mean, what really are they going to be able to do in terms of pinching the business model as we know it so far?
That's an interesting question. I mean, the fundamental issue here is the United States does not have a substantive privacy law. There is no law that tells Facebook what it is and is not allowed to do with data. What the FTC can do is they can punish companies that they believe have been misleading, that have said misleading things, or that have unfair practices under an effectively a 100-year-old definition of those practices. And so while there's a separate organization here, it doesn't really speak to substantively what decision does Facebook need to make. And I think what this shows is that we need to have a law in the United States that defines how we want tech companies, but other kinds of companies as well, to handle our personal data. How do we want them interacting with one another? And how do we want to balance the privacy issues with some of the really important security, safety, and competition issues that are brought up by this order?
So it sounds good on paper to talk about a designated compliance officer responsible for the privacy program that then is subject to the approval of this new board privacy committee. But you seem to be, as I would assume many people are, wondering what it's going to mean in practice.
That's right. It's hard to know what it means in practice. I think the other core issue here is it's clear that the animating complaint behind this entire FTC order is the Cambridge Analytica situation, right? So to recap really briefly, the Cambridge Analytica situation was the fact that an external developer had access to user data via Facebook's APIs, broke Facebook's terms of service, and then kept that data and sold it to Cambridge Analytica. The problem here is that a lot of the privacy issues that people have with Facebook really are not related to that kind of issue with a third-party app developer. A lot of people are concerned about what kind of information the big tech companies have about them and their family members. And this doesn't substantively address that. What it does is it creates people who are going to study this issue. It's going to create a parallel process for reporting up to the board and reporting publicly, but it doesn't define how this balance is going to be done in the future. And again, that's why we need some kind of legislation now to back this up, to decide in the United States, how do we want to balance not just the financial equities, but again, the competition and safety equities with some of the privacy decisions we're going to make.
I mean, the timing of all of this, Alex, is just interesting because we get this settlement and these restrictions and these new rules less than 24 hours after we learn that the DOJ is opening a wider antitrust probe against social media companies and other big tech firms. I wonder if one has anything to do with the other, or any of what came out of the FTC today will impact the DOJ's findings or investigation or whatever we're calling it at this point.
Yeah, that's a good question. The DOJ announcement was extremely short on details, right? So they didn't speak at all about what they're investigating. My guess is that they're not related. To the extent that this order is going to be impactful, though, it's actually going to help Facebook and the other big tech companies from a competition issue. The truth is that the APIs, the interfaces that allowed Cambridge Analytica to get that data, also allowed for a little bit of competition in the social media space. What this order does is it effectively orders Facebook to never again build the capability for other companies to use their data. That would have been a real problem for Facebook 7-8 years ago when it was growing rapidly. Now that it is in a dominant position, hoarding all of that data is actually great for the company. And so it seems to me that we're actually going two different directions that are not compatible. If you want these companies to have competition, then you need to require them to allow other people to utilize the data they sit on. The number one piece of value that they have is they are sitting on the data of billions of people. But by ordering them to never again allow that data out of their control, it kind of immunizes them from any kind of criticism. So I think it's actually really confused. I think critics of the tech companies are a little bit confused about what they want right now. And so the FTC is the first one of all these organizations to get an agreement, but that agreement leans very hard one direction.
Yeah, that's a very tough needle to thread. Would you want to work, your tenure at Facebook, would you have wanted to work under a settlement like this?
Actually, yeah. I think this is, one thing that the settlement will do that's a positive thing is that it will empower the people at the company that care about privacy and user trust, right? That is always a problem at tech companies, is that there's this basic assumption that the products that we build in Silicon Valley are good for people, right? That everything we do, just by us doing it, makes us the good guys, and that's just not true. So the fact that there are people whose job it is to now think about the trust and privacy implications of every decision, I think is actually a good outcome, and it will make it better for the people at the company who care about these issues.